Hi everybody, this is a tutorial on the concept of non-destructive editing and using your adjustment layers to edit your photography like a pro. So what I did is I set a canvas, and I believe my file size, image size, is an 11 by 8.5. It doesn't necessarily matter. Somewhere in there is good, and then your 300 resolution, of course, is key. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go File, Place Embedded. Of course, there are other ways to open up your images, but this is the one that I want you to get a little bit more familiar with. Now, this photograph would lose information if I stretched it to fit, and that's not what I want to do. So I'm going to just leave it as is and hit Enter. Then you're going to come up to the top and go Image, Trim, and that's going to allow you to trim up that excess canvas. Now, if you don't know how to zoom in and out, if you hold Alt on your keyboard and then on your mouse, you've got that little rolly ball. That will allow you to zoom in and out very easily. And of course, you can use your, your ups and downs here. All right, now, concept that we haven't talked about yet is what this little icon right here means. And I did before tell you that you can right-click and rasterize your file. What that's going to do is it's going to allow you to make changes to that image permanently. But as we start to move forward and really embracing this concept of non-destructive editing, this is something that I want you to leave. Now, what this little icon means is that this is a smart object, and that's going to allow you to edit this image non-destructively, meaning you can resize it, you can add filters to it, you can edit it using your image adjustments, and we will be doing all of that moving forward every day in this class. But by preserving the original file, you'll always have the original. And if you're working as a professional, that's something that's very important. So we're going to leave that there. Now, if you go up to your adjustments in the top, so image, adjustments, you're going to see all of these places. This is your adjustment panel. However, these are going to make changes directly to your image unless you've got that smart object there. So what I want to show you right now is if you go brightness, contrast, and maybe we want to add in some brights, and maybe I want to adjust my contrast. Contrast is going to make my brights a little brighter and my darks a little darker. So maybe I'm liking to kind of pump up my contrast, and maybe I want to add in a little bit more bright. It's kind of pulling in this, I don't know if this is like a mist shower coming in the back or this is just lighting. But what you're going to see is then you've got this smart filter. You can kind of think of this like this is the parent file and then this is the child file. Now, again, this smart object is going to, again, preserve that original image. So I could turn off my little smart filter so I can see what I'm doing with each step. So as we start to think about editing our photos, this is one way that you can edit. You can make sure that you've got your smart object here and you apply your filters by going up here to image adjustment. You've got things like levels, which is going to play with your blacks, your darks. This is your middle range. And over here, we've got our highlights. So typically, and this isn't a good example, but typically when I open up my levels, I want to make sure that this toggle on the left is going up the side of the mountain. Now it already is kind of in there, but maybe I want to bring it forward a tiny bit. I don't want to crank up too much, but again, these are your dark values and these are your middle values. And then here we've got our highlights. And if your highlights are too far over here, you might not get enough of them that you kind of want them moving up the side of the mountain. So moving our toggle here. So I can again say, okay. Now you can see I've got a levels and a brightness and contrast smart filters. So I can turn off each individual one and it isolates each edit. Now I'm going to Control Z and I'm going to go back and take all of this out. So I'm pressing Control Z all the way Oops, one step too far, to where now I'm just basic on my regular image. There's another place that you are going to be editing, and that is going to be your adjustments panel. Now, if you don't see your adjustments panel over here, so this is your image adjustments. Over here, your adjustment panel, you want to make sure that this is clicked. So right now I turned it off. So you want to make sure that your adjustments is on. So over here is your adjustment layers. And with this, it's going to, again, put a filter in a sense on top. It's the same stuff as over here. It's just in a different context, right? It kind of edits it a little bit differently. So again, I could go over here to brightness and contrast, and I can play with, my brightness. But what you're going to see here is that it puts a filter on top. Now, this might not seem like that big of a difference, but here in a minute, I'm going to show you why these two things are or could be important. So it's applying a filter on top. Now, again, I could turn it off. I could then say, okay, I like that, but then I'm going to go back and image adjustments. Maybe I want to check out curves, and I want to play with where my value is. Maybe I want to kind of mess with, maybe that's too bright in the back. Oh, that's too dull. Oh, that's a little interesting. Oh, that's actually bringing out a little bit more information in here. It's a super red. So image adjustment, I can come over here to color balance, and I can play with maybe taking a little bit of red out. I want to balance out a little bit of green. Oh, that might be a little too much. So you have to understand, though, that all of these are stacking up on top of themselves. So each filter is affecting everything that goes beneath it. So this color balance is going to continuously stack up. So every time I do an adjustment layer over here, it's going to be a filter on top of a filter on top of a filter. Whereas if I go the other way, where I was showing you the layer panel up here, and the parent and the child, I know that's a silly way to say it, but the parent and child editing style here is it's going to just happen to that one layer without affecting all of the layers underneath it. So your exposure is how much light is in your image. And if you understand how a camera takes a picture, we're talking about the amount of light that's hitting the image sensor. But in Photoshop, it's kind of replicating that. So if I say yes to that, then you can see that this little smart filter is only being applied to this one layer without looking through all the rest of them. Now, again, super complex. Like I said, editing like a pro. Now I'm going to shut off all of these. And so you can see that this one just edited it that way. But with these, they stack up and they kind of keep adding up. They add on top of themselves. Again, this one will edit just that one layer without looking through the rest of them. So another way that you can think about this, and maybe I want to turn off all of these so that you can see my original photo. So there's my original photo. Maybe I want to have two photos in one image. So let's say I want to go File, Place Embedded, and let's go back over here and let me pull something. Well, I'm not saying that this has to be this way, but let's say I wanted an image within an image. So if I want to edit just this picture and I don't want to affect this base picture, you would want to use your top image adjustments and do the parent and child edit. Because what that's going to do is it's just going to edit that one picture. It's not going to affect the whole thing. So if I take this back, again, saturation, the word saturation, we're talking about how much color. So what I did is I just took the color out. I'm going to put it back. If I go the other route and I say, well, I want to have a picture within a picture, and I come over to this image adjustment layer, and let's say I go back to the same thing, hue and saturation, and I take the color all the way out. It's going to affect the whole picture, the whole project. So let me just reiterate that a little bit. I'm showing you two different ways to use adjustment layers. Your adjustment layers panel on the right is going to affect all of it. And it is going to be something that it stacks up on top of itself, and everything kind of sees through down to the bottom. So one layer then stacks up on the next layer, then stacks up on the next layer. So this filters on top of this filters on top of this filter. However, if you are, again, you're using your smart object, so you have a smart object that you're using. So that means the image is going to be preserved. If you go up to your top toolbar and you go image adjustment and you work over in this area, again, you have to be on the layer that you want to apply that to. Image adjustment, and you edit this way, what you are going to get is you are going to get a parent and then the child, and it's going to allow you to edit only that one part of your image. Hopefully that is not too incredibly complex for you. I know that this is something that is, there's a lot of things with Photoshop. There's always more than one way to do everything. But as far as non-destructive editing goes, just remember that your smart object thumbnail is your friend. That is a good thing. That's going to make it so that your original image that you're working from, your original photograph, stays preserved so that you'll have it. And then you have two places to edit. You've got your image adjustments up on the top. Image adjustments, this is where you are primarily going to be editing a photograph from. And if you go through this method, it's going to allow you to make changes to whatever image you're working on. Now, if you want to work on multiple images that are stacked up, and maybe you're creating some sort of a composite, kind of quote unquote like a collage type thing, then you might want to consider doing that way. If you are working over here on your adjustment layers panel, it's going to apply filters to the whole project, to the whole thing, and each filter will stack up on itself. Now today, what you are going to be doing in Photoshop is you are going to be playing with these two different areas. I would like you to explore all of these different things, and remember Control Z if you don't like something. You can also right click and delete your layer, or, oops, excuse me, or you can grab it and you can drag it and put it in your trash can. Now, Control Z is your friend. It's going to allow you to undo everything that you do, so that's a good thing. The next place that I want to show you or talk to you about, and I am going to delete out all of these layers that I've got here, all of these adjustment layers. And I'm going to delete that. So I'm going to take it back to my basic. Let me just turn that guy off. All right, so now we're kind of back to, well, I might as well delete this as well. Okay. So the next place that I want to show you is your filter, and you are going to go to your camera raw filter. So camera raw filter is something that is a little new for Photoshop, as in the last 3 years. This is like a quick and easy, all-in-one location place to edit your photograph. So you're going to see a lot of the same stuff. You're going to see your temperature, your tint, obviously exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows. Again, this is going to look very similar to your image adjustments. However, you've got a few more places that you can work. Now, your temperature is a little different. You can think of like, I want it to look more like a warm day, or maybe I want to make it look more like a cold day. So you're adding in cool temperatures or warm temperatures. Perhaps we want this to look more like a cool winter evening. I can also mess with, do I want to take maybe a little bit of that magenta out and I want to balance it with a little bit of my green, or am I wanting to kind of pump up those purples? I'm thinking I'm feeling a little bit of it more in this direction here. Exposure, hopefully you play with that a little on your own. I might bump up my contrast in this area. Play with my highlights, maybe pump up my highlights just a tiny bit, pulling out some of those brights. Blacks, I can crank up my blacks a little bit. Texture, this is going to sharpen my texture. So this is actually it works a little bit like your sharpen tool, which we'll get to later. You can play with clarity. So you can kind of see what happens when I pump up my clarity versus lowering my clarity. Keep going down this. Again, you're going to see things like curves, which again, we played with in your adjustment layers. This is going to just be a different way and a different place to be able to play with them. Highlights, all of this stuff is in here. Your color mixer, this is going to, again, allow you to isolate each type of color and move it to kind of adjust each color independently. You could keep on going down. Now, there are some other places that you can play that are kind of wild. So you've got things like distortion, which maybe you kind of like. Maybe it's something that it works for what you're going for, but I'm not feeling it so much on this picture. So I'm going to try to put it back somewhere near zero. Vignettes are kind of fun, especially when we get to portraits. But this is where it's going to give you some sort of a framing effect. So you can add a vignette that's darker around the edges versus something that is lighter around the edges. This almost gives it a little bit more of like a vintagey, washed out feel. Again, kind of a cool effect to use when you're working with portraiture especially. But this, I'm kind of digging a little bit darker, more dramatic edge. I'm going to leave you right now with this and let you continue to play. So again, ways to non-destructively edit your picture. So you've got your smart object concept. Hopefully that makes sense to you. You understand that if you're in your smart object and you come up to your image adjustments, it's going to be the parent-child editing style, which is going to allow you to just edit that one image. If you have stacked up images and you care, like maybe you had a photo on top of this that had some writing or it's some sort of collage, and you want one thing to be edited, but you don't want everything else to be edited, your parent-child option is the best. If you do your adjustment panel on the side over here, it's going to put filters on the top and everything reads through. Last thing, just as a refresher, is your filter that's called your camera raw filter. And again, this is going to be kind of like a one-stop shop to editing your photo. Hopefully that's exciting for you and you are able to play with the photos that I've attached to your assignment in Google Classroom. You are going to be experimenting with this and editing. When you are done, you are welcome to flatten it, save it as a JPEG, or export it, whatever